the foreign language called algebra? Well, the art of the literal translation.
Welcome to Mark's Math Methods.
Math uses symbols and English uses words. We do not normally see equations floating in the sky. What we have are situations that need to be translated. So, which English words mean which math symbols? Here are the basic math symbols that we'll talk about: the plus sign, the minus sign, the multiplication dot, the division symbol, and the equal sign. The plus symbol can be indicated by the word sum, or add, or plus, or increase, or more than. Subtraction, the minus sign, can be represented by the words difference, subtract, minus, decrease, less than. Product for multiplication dot, or multiply, or of, times, or double or triple. Double would mean 2 times. The division symbol, the word quotient, divide, per, half, which just means divide by 2. The equal sign can be represented by the word is, or equals, or results in, or represents. There are other words, but these are the main ones that you'll see. These 4 words, sum, difference, product, quotient, imply an order, which I will talk about later. These 2, more than and less than, can be tricky. I always write them backwards, and I'll show you how I do this later. Let's practice some literal translations. We'll start with phrases, expressions. The sum of a number and 3. Oops, I forgot to tell you how to handle unknowns. We normally use a letter such as X to represent an unknown quantity. In practice, you can use any letter you want. Sometimes it is useful to use the first letter of the object's name to represent it. Examples: use H to represent height, or N to represent a number, C to represent cost, T to represent total, etc. But X is the default variable of choice. Let's practice some literal translations. We will start with phrases, expressions. Now, phrases are in English, and in math they're called expressions. Phrases are not complete sentences, they're phrases, and expressions are not equations or inequalities, they're just expressions. They won't have an equal sign. The sum of a number and 3. Sum means to add, but with an implied order left to right. Number, that's an unknown. We'll use the letter N to represent this unknown number. 3, well, it's just 3. So the literal translation of the sum and a number, the sum of a number and 3 is N plus 3. The product of 5 and some number. Product means to multiply, but we begin with an implied order left to right. 5, well, that's 5. It's just a number, 5. Some number, there's our unknown quantity. We'll use the letter N. Again, you can use any letter you want. And sometimes in a question, they will specifically tell you what letter they want you to use as your variable. The literal translation of the product of 5 and some number would be 5 times n, or just 5n. When things are backed up together, like the 5 and the n are with no operation between them, it's assumed to be multiplication. Another one. The difference between a number and 2. Difference means subtract, but also has an implied order, left to right. A number is a variable, unknown. We'll use n. 2, well, that's 2. So the literal translation of the difference between a number and 2 is n minus 2. The quotient of a number and 7. Quotient means divide with an implied order top to bottom. That's because, suggestion, when you see the word quotient, think fraction. When you see the word quotient, think fraction. The number, unknown, we'll use n, goes on top, and 7 goes on the bottom. So the literal translation of the quotient of a number and 7 is n over 7 as a fraction. N is the numerator, 7 is the denominator. While also correct, n divided by 7, see the implied order, top to bottom, left to right, matches. You'll find that the fraction version is more helpful in the long run. Both versions are correct literal translations, but again, you'll find the fraction is more helpful in the long run when you've got bigger problems. Almost forgot. There's one more symbol that we will need to know how to translate. That symbol, percent. The percent sign. We need to know what it means before we can translate it from English to math. Take the word percent, split it apart into its two parts, per and cent. Per means divided by, represented by a division symbol. Cent is an old Roman word short for century, which means 100, because a centurion was an officer in charge of 100 people. So percent means divided by 100. So 13% means, as a fraction, would be 13 over 100. As a decimal, would be 0.13. Both are valid translations. Sometimes you'll find that writing it as 0.13 is more convenient. Other times you'll find that writing it as 13 divided by 100, 13 over 100, writing it as a fraction, will be more convenient. So you get to choose which one you use. 7% would mean, as a fraction, 7 over 100. As a decimal, 0.07. Again, you have a choice on how you express it when you translate it. You may be more comfortable with one versus the other, or one may be more practical in the long scheme of the problem. It's the whole question that's being translated. Now for the more than and less than that I promised. We're going to translate the following expression, 2 more than a number. Remember before I mentioned I'd write these backwards? Well, here's my reasoning as why I do that. If I wanted to have 2 more cookies than you, wouldn't I need to know how many you have first so that I can make sure I have 2 more than you? So first, I see what you have and then add 2. So I write it this way. 2 more than a number. So even though I put the 2 first, I wrote it at the end and then worked my way back to the left. So I'm writing it backwards. So we likewise translate the following expression, 7 less than a number. So I'm going to start with the 7. Less than means I'm going to be subtracting it from something, and that is a number. So n minus 7 is 7 less than a number. Now let's look at some sentences, that's English, to get equations, that's math. The sum of a number and 3 is 7. This is a complete sentence, unlike before where we had phrases. Here's the translation. N plus 3 equals 7. So the sum means I'm going to be adding something of a number and 3, so n plus 3, means it equals and 7. So the sum of a number and 3 is 7, is n plus 3 equals 7. Nine less than the product of 7 and a number equals 23. This has got several different parts to it. Here's what the translation looks like. 7 times n minus 9 equals 23. So here's how we write it. 9 less than the product of 7 and a number equals 23. So this is one of the less thans that I'm going to write backwards. So 9 less than the product of 7 and a number. 7n minus 9 equals 23 is the equal sign and the 23. What is 19% of 147? Here's the translation. X equals 0.19 times 147. So what is our unknown? We'll use the letter X. You can use any letter, unless the problem specifically says otherwise. Is means equals. 19% written as a decimal is 0.19. Of means multiply. And 147 is a number. Or we could write it as X equals 19 over 100 times 147. Both are valid depending on how you want to use it. How about one more sentence to translate? There are 50 occupied apartments in a building. This represents 30% of the total number of apartments. How many apartments are there in the building? That's a lot of words. So first we need to find the important words. 50, obviously, represents 30% of the total. 50 represents 30% of the total. Those are the key words that we need to translate. Sort of like the noun, subject, the predicate, the verb, and the object. Fifty is 50. Represents means equals. 30%, 0.30. Of means multiply. And the total is t. Or if we write it as a fraction, 50 equals 30 over 100 times t. So you got to find the words you need and then translate those.
I hope the presentation was helpful. Thumbs up, subscribe, comment. And if you have any problem types you'd like me to demonstrate, there's my address.